Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, and we have a very important and chashuv, you say in Hebrew, guest, and that's Rabbi Yosef Vinishki. Rabbi, can I call you Yosef?
You can call me Yosef. They used to say, call me anything you want, just don't call me Kulak. But that's back in the day.
All right, Yosef, you have some very interesting ideas. He's going to tell us a little bit about end of time. That again, the Moshiach's ready to come, but I'll let you start talking and tell us what you have researched.
Yeah, thank you very much, Simon. So at the outset, I just want to dedicate this episode to my dear son-in-law, Noam ben Ahuva, and his cousin, Guy ben Miriam, and to all the holy tzaddikim that are in the IDF. Currently, as we speak, they're going to Gaza, and they're fighting for us now, not just for themselves, and not just for Israelis, but for every Yid on planet Earth. So basically, yeah. So I wanted to touch on what's going on right now. It's already week 4 of the events that began on. Was it
October 7th, which was a Shabbos. Now, we have to explain, there really was Shmini Atzeres, a Jewish holiday, but in Israel they only have one day.
Right.
We have 2, so it was like a little bit of two in one.
Correct, yeah. So with us, we went to the Sunday, October 8th, but when we came to shul, to the synagogue that morning, already rumors were flying, and somebody had been told by somebody else, and people were throwing around, numbers that were just sounding horrific, unbelievable. Tens and hundreds of people never, unfortunately, that perished. And sure enough, after the holiday was over, everybody tuned in, got on the internet, and unfortunately, it was all true. So, with that in mind, I was kind of thinking to kind of like spin it by way of presenting my view of what I think is going on, and what I think is going on, as we've seen, not just vis-a-vis Israel, but just the Jewish people in general, all over the world. The hostility, the anti-Semitism. So it's really 2 things going on. One is the claim or denial of our claim to the Holy Land, or the land of Israel, by the nation, specifically by Arabs. And secondly, the anti-Semitism that they go, both go hand in hand. And if you have one, you cannot have the other. So I'll just start off by bringing up sources that, if anybody's confronted, they don't have to quote me. I mean, these are known classic sources. So just for historical review, the land had been promised to the very first Jew, Avraham Avinu, our forefather Abraham. This goes back almost 4,000 years, so this is really nothing new under the sun. The land later on, I would say about 300 to 400 years later, the land was conquered by Joshua, Yeshua. It was divided up. There was, in other words, Jewish presence in the land of Israel goes back almost 4,000 years. And as everybody knows, there were numerous. First and foremost, there was the kingdom of King Solomon, and preceding that was the kingdom of his father David Melech. The building of the first temple, which stood for a very long time, 410 years.
Yes.
Then there was a break of 70 years. Jews were exiled to Babylonia, to what is now Iran, Persia. When they got back, they rebuilt the second temple, which lasted even longer than the first one, even though it lacked some of the holiness and things from the first temple contained. Nevertheless,
I mean, the bottom line is the Jewish people have been there for thousands of years living in the land. I mean, it's the bottom line.
Yeah,
and it's not just
really, it's not. Yeah, it's not. It's not a. It's in other words, Nobody stole anything. Nobody robbed anyone of any real estate. This is ours. This is ours from just about day one. Well, not exactly, but long enough. And in fact, the times when before the Jewish people settled back in the land, beginning 19th century, with the influx of Jews coming into, which was then called Palestine. By the way, the chief newspaper in Israel, which is the Jerusalem Post. If you get a copy of it from, let's say, 1939, it was called the Palestine Post. And back in the 30s, if somebody called themselves a Palestinian, it was more often than not a Jewish person. It was never a reference to the Arabs. I just recently came across a very interesting book, or reference to that book. Somebody by the name of Rinaldi. He was a Dutch explorer, traveler. He visited the land in early 1700s, and he describes how he visited over 2,000 communities. There were very few people. It was very sparse. The majority of the population was Jewish, especially in the key cities such as Jerusalem, Hebron, Akko, a few Arab communities here and there. And there's a famous account of Mark Twain, who visited about 170 years later in the 1860s, and he describes the place as desolate, abandoned, really sad, really like a forlorn kind of a place, not a happy place, with very few people, and again, the majority of people in Jerusalem were Jewish people. So, all these facts together is, I think, good ammunition to combat these false claims, really, that the land does not belong to us. It does belong to us. On a different level, there's a famous commentary of Rashi, Rabbeinu Shimon ben Yitzchak, Shlomo ben Yitzchak, and which every Chumash, every printed edition of the 5 books of Moses, that's the very first comment in the very first verse of Genesis. In the beginning of God's creation of heaven, of the heavens and earth, and so forth. Right. So Rashi stops right there, and he basically asks the question: Why begin with all this cosmology, all this science? Who really cares? Because why? The 5 books of Moses, what we call the Torah, is really it's a book of instructions. It's a book of how to perform the commandments. The milk and meat, the tefillin, Shabbat, kosher food, holidays, and so on and so forth. So it's really it's a how-to, right? It's not really a physics text. It's not really a historical text. And he explains. And by the way, and keep in mind, so he lived when he was born in 1040. And he passed away in 1105, so he lived about 65 years, give or take. He writes that you really should have opened with the very first mitzvah, the Birkas HaChodesh, blessing of the month, which was the first mitzvah that the Jewish people were granted, so to speak, right, upon leaving Egypt. But no, it specifically opens up with this grand creation story, this cosmic view, and he explains the reason for it, that there's going to come a time when the nations, he doesn't specify which ones, he just states nations that will contest our right to that land, and they will say, you are robbers, you stole the land from the Canaanites. They haven't been canonized around for thousands of years, right? And mind you, he writes this in, let's say, the year 1100, which is almost a thousand years ago, right? So obviously, at that time, the place was desolate. There were very few Jewish people living there. So why would he even put that in, knowing that it wasn't really relevant? So obviously, he has some sort of a prophetic vision, some sort of prophetic gift, and he knew that it was going to there would come a time when this would become relevant. So that's the portion that has to do with our enemies, adversaries' claims that we don't belong in Israel. Now, what goes hand in hand with that is the anti-Semitism. So it's not really just their dislike, their unhappiness of Jews living in Israel. They don't like Jews. They don't like Jews. And one way to combat it is, number one, we got to be proud. We have to be proud of who we are, what we represent. But on top of that, they need to be educated. Well, why do I say that? Why do I bring up education? So, as is known, Jewish people have a bunch of commandments. We have 613 commandments. A lot of them today are not yet, soon, but as of right now, they're not applicable because they have to do with the temple, with the Kohanim, the priests, the sacrifice, and so on and so forth. So, as soon as, God willing, any second, we have the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, all of that kicks in right now, but there's still a lot to worry about. So, but it's not just the Jews. The non-Jewish people also have commandments. So what's the rationale behind that? So the first man and woman, Adam and Eve, were given 6 commandments, and basically it goes by the Hebrew alphabet. Aleph was Aleph no. Okay, so base is precursor, not to blaspheme, not to curse God. Gimel is gezel or robbery, stealing. Dalet would be dinim or laws. Then that's 3. The 3 remaining would be shvichas damim, prohibition against murder,
Right.
spilling blood. Gilei ra is immorality, and I think I'm missing one. I think I mentioned dinim. Anyway, there was the 6 basic commandments.
Well, why don't you show, you have some interesting cards here.
Oh, yeah, right, okay.
Cards.
So I'm gonna, good point. So I got these cards. So there's a very,
It's gonna be hard to show it.
yeah,
on
but
the,
I'll put, this is gonna go in the comments with Rabbi Simon's permission. There's a great website, it's called asknoah.org, asknoah.org, and it lists, actually not the 6 commandments that were given to Adam and Rishon, the first man, but 7. And there's a reason why it's 7 and not 6, and there's a reason why they go by Noahide commandments and not Adam commandments. There's a reason for that. I'll just read them to you. I'll just read it out loud. But so basically, and the 6th commandment was prohibition against idol worship. So when the flood ended, many years later, 1656 from creation, all of humanity consisted of Noah, his wife, and their 3 sons, and the sons' wives, his daughters-in-law. God added a 7th commandment, which is called in Hebrew Ever Menachai, or in English it's translated as don't eat meat taken from a still living animal, or avoid cruelty. So what's the story behind that? So at the times of Adam, humans were not allowed to kill, to eat meat. They could eat a dead animal if they felt like eating a piece of dead meat, but they could not kill. So after the flood, when a lot of things changed, with the lifespan went down, seasons kicked in, and so forth. Before the flood, they only had to plant every 40 years. Now they had to be every year. A lot changed physically. So the Almighty added the 7th commandment. Now there was a permission to kill animals for food. Okay, so this went on for a number of years, up until basically the giving of the Torah. So we're talking basically around 1,500 years. At a certain point, the nations kind of like fell away from observing these commandments, and somehow God communicated to them that hey, the commandments are still in place, but the schar, the reward, I'm taking off. You're still obligated to do these 7, but the reward you would get, that's off the table. Until the giving of the Torah in the year 2448. So this is 3,335 years ago, give or take. And at that point, those 7 commandments, the Noahide laws, or as they're called in Hebrew, Sheva Mitzvos Bnei Noach. Sheva is 7, Mitzvos is commandments, Bnei Noach is Noahides. They were incorporated into the Torah itself. So now they became part of the it became part of the Torah itself, and it started to become obligatory. So the Rambam Maimonides describes this flow as God commanded Moses to command, in turn, to command the Jewish people that they should teach and instruct the non-Jewish nations in these 7 laws. And by the way, the law that the Gezel, or the prohibition of robbery, stealing, includes not claiming Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, for themselves. So that kind of falls under that rubric, so to speak. So for long periods of time, the enforcement of these laws was not feasible. Either the Jewish people didn't have the power, or authority, or independence. I would imagine the times when the sovereignty existed in Eretz Yisrael, they were able to enforce it. But most of our history, this has not been the case. We were not in a position to enforce it. A, it was illegal in many places. B, it was really dangerous because of the opposition from either the church or Islamic authorities. Nevertheless, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, beginning in the 80s, publicly, privately even before, but publicly began, so to speak, to push for the dissemination of these laws, basically stating that whatever opposition that had existed is now gone, both from Esav, which sort of symbolizes the European nations, and even in the Muslim lands, in a kind of a subtle way. Islam is a little closer to the real deal. Obviously, it's not, but. And Maimonides states that why did Christianity and Islam appeared, and he explains we don't know God's thoughts and rationales, but each one of them sort of has helped in bringing around the idea of God's unity, and maybe some sort of a messianic kind of a idea. So, but to go back to the push for the 7 Noahide commandments, Rabbi explained that the time has come, that the non-Jews are open, receptive, and they not only will they not oppose, they will appreciate that this knowledge that they too have these laws. And again, one of the corollaries to the laws against stealing is not claiming for themselves the land of Israel. And recently there have been, the last 10 years, there have appeared many books, websites. I have one of these books here in the studio, and again, there will be a reference to it in the comments. This is called The Divine Code by somebody by the name of Rabbi Moshe Wiener. I believe he's an American. He lives in Jerusalem. Yeah. Now, this is the first edition. There's only, I think, half of the 7 commandments. Now, each one of those commandments, it's not just the 7 rules. They have a lot of subsections. There's a lot of detail that each one encompasses. Just to give you one example, the prohibition causing harm, or living from cutting off meat from a living animal, is not uniform. What do I mean? If you want to, for Jewish dietary purposes, if you want to have steak, you have to slaughter the cow in a kosher way, and then you go through the salting and rinsing, salting, and all that. Then it becomes inspection. Then it becomes kosher. Whereas when it comes to fish, once the fish is out of the water, it is considered as if it's been slaughtered. So there's nothing additional that needs to be done. So you would think that cow, goat, whatnot, these are mammals, and it applies to all the mammals. Turns out it's not the case. The mammals that live in water, such as dolphins and whales, even though not kosher, but they have the status of fish, and once they're out of the water, they're considered as if they're gone. Still, they need to be treated humanely, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of detail, and Rambam points out that a non-Jew who does these seven or fulfills these 7 Noahide commandments, with the knowledge that it's really because of God communicating to Moses, communicating to the Jews, and not because of their intellect. So such a non-Jew is considered a one of the pious of the nations, one of the tzaddikim umas ha'olam, to the extent they merit a portion in the future, in the olam haba, and even the resurrection, which is typically just the Jewish.
Yosef, it is very exciting that you're saying all this and very important. Do you have anything for like the current events?
Yes, I do.
Yes,
I do. In fact, yeah. So that's the So just to kind of like finish off on the with the it's to approach a non-Jew with these cards and whatnot. It's fairly easy. People are usually appreciative, and I haven't personally I haven't had any pushback. They're happy that you're there to share something with them that's positive, that's uplifting. And we have a lot of fears. We're hostage to our fears. And now that the situation has changed so drastically, it's a good time to let go of these fears, because just like our enemies are going all out, we kind of have to, also go out. Just to finish off, there's something that I just recently came across. There was a Jewish scholar by the name of Yonason Aibshitz, and so somebody just discovered that he had one of his books, drushes, I forget the exact name. Oops, it's not coming. 1 second. Let me try it again. Come on. So this is something that he wrote around 350 years ago in that sefer, and he basically says that the famous episode in the Bible where Bilam, who was a non-Jewish prophet and a sorcerer, whatnot, he on behalf of Balak, the local king, who had been commissioned to curse the Jewish people, but as we all know the famous episode where he tried to and he failed, and he basically told Balak that I can't, they're not, it's impossible to curse them. Whoever curses them is really putting himself in harm's way. And instead of cursing them, he blessed them. However, because there was so to speak at least an attempt at that, an attempt to curse them. Something happened in the fabric of the universe that had to somehow, at some point, kind of like materialize. So this Rabbi Yonason Aibshitz states that there's going to come a time towards the end days where there's going to be some sort of an event where there will be a lot of dancing, bachurim, bachurot, young men and young women, somewhere in Eretz Yisrael, and it will be not exactly done in a kosher way, and he goes on to explain that somehow that event nullified all the, as we know, on Yom Kippur the sins are forgiven and whatnot, And not only that, we get schusim, we get merits for staying the course. So he says, he claims that event will take away to whatever extent those merits. So yeah, God forbid nobody's sitting in judgment and pointing fingers. We all grieve and pain for every Yid that's been involved, that fell victim to these atrocities. Nevertheless, it's a very interesting, it's an observation. Again, this is 350 years ago. It isn't recent. And just to finish off on a more uplifting note, so there's a sikha from the Rebbe which he spoke, sikha reminder, in 1968 on Shabbos Mivorchim of Chodesh Cheshvan, which is this month, where he basically brings up the idea of there being two types of shofar. So there's a shofar stam, so to speak, which was sounded at Matan Torah. When the Torah was given, God sounded the shofar, and that shofar penetrated, there was no echo, and then he juxtaposes that with the final shofar, shofar gadol, the great shofar, that will be sounded in the end of days. And he kind of he contrasts, he compares, but the bottom line is that this final shofar will awaken all Jews, every type of Jew. He specifically cites the example of Jews living in the land of Asher, which means happy, they're content, and also Nidachim, Jews that are oppressed. Now he said that in 1967, which Russia, Soviet Union at that time, did not allow any expressions of Yiddishkeit. So for my money, this is a reference to both the United States and Soviet Union at that time. So Rabbi was basically describing two types of Jews: one living in a happy, in a free environment, and others that are suffering and oppressed. Nevertheless, he finished off by saying that each one Hashem will individually take out of their environment and bring them to Eretz Yisrael, to Geula. And what's interesting, this completely blew me away. He said one sentence, that this is going to be accompanied by Seuris Taiman. Seuris Taiman means a storm or a windstorm from the Taiman, from Yemen. Yeah. And just today, some rebels from Yemen tried to fire missiles into Eilat. Fortunately, they were intercepted. But it's uncanny how this, it really, does jump out at you. Yeah, I'm not sure what the Rebbe had in mind, obviously, when he said that. Nevertheless, a lot of these events are pointing to really, we're coming to some sort of a crescendo. We're coming to some sort of a, final, I don't know, countdown. And as the Rebbe famously said back in '91, when there were hostilities with Iraq against Kuwait, and also the Jewish people were afraid, when he famously quoted the Yalkut Shmoini, that in the year the Moshiach comes, the king of Persia will run to the king of Aram. Basically, it's a reference to Arabs, Persian Arabs. It's kind of like the same thing a little bit, and they'll be terrified, along with the Jewish people. At that point, Moshiach will get up on the roof of the base of Mikdash, the holy temple, and will proclaim the Anovim. Anovim means humble ones, or terrified ones. There's probably different ways to translate it. Everything that I have done for you. Don't be afraid, and the time of your redemption, so hopefully we will see this immediately with the rebuilding of the temple, and
All right, so thank you very much. Some inspiring words on a good note at the end. That again, the obligation of humanity, and number two, that a little insight of what's happening with all the troubles in Israel. We only hope that it ends up on a happy note. Thank you very
Amen.
much for being here on the Jewish View.